ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ප්‍රථම වරට SLT 4G වෙතින් දැන් Pure TV නරඹන්න. ඉදිරියටම ගෙන යන SLT 4G.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
In your headlines tonight, resilient measures, curfew extended in 5 northern districts as 4 more cases added to Sri Lanka's COVID-19 tally. No shortages. All essential service providers given a vote of confidence as window opens tomorrow to replenish supplies. Tragic state. Italy suffers the deadliest day since the coronavirus outbreak began as nearly 800 people perish. Price of indiscipline. Nearly 800 people arrested for violating the nationwide curfew. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Sunday the 22nd of March 2020.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
69.97ට SMS කර රුපියල් මිලියන 3ක මුල්තැන්ගේ උපකරණ දිනාගෙන අවුරුද්දෙම කුස්සිය ටයිම් සේව් කරගන්න.
Good evening. Welcome to your English news broadcast on AdaDerana 24. In your headlines, we have resilient measures, curfew extended in 5 northern districts as 4 more cases added to Sri Lanka's COVID-19 tally. Also, no shortages as essential services providers give a vote of confidence as window opens tomorrow to replenish supplies. Tragic state, Italy suffers the deadliest day since the coronavirus outbreak began as nearly 800 people perish. Price of indiscipline, nearly 800 people arrested for violating nationwide curfew. We'll bring you all these stories, but we begin with the developments on COVID-19 in Sri Lanka. The ongoing curfew imposed as a measure to prevent the spread of coronavirus COVID-19 is extended in 5 more districts. As a result, the districts of Jaffna, Mana, Vaunia, Mullaitivu and Kilinochchi will see the curfew being lifted on Tuesday morning instead of tomorrow. Similarly, curfew will also be extended in the districts of Colombo, Gampaha and Puttlam until Tuesday. Meanwhile, the police says that 790 individuals have now been arrested for violating the period of curfew.
Several amendments were made to the timings of the ongoing curfew in the districts of Colombo, Gampaha and Puttlam yesterday. The curfew in these districts were extended until 6 a.m. on Tuesday the 24th. And today the same was done to 5 more districts covering Jaffna, Mana, Vaunia, Mullaitivu and Kilinochchi. Curfew for these 8 districts will be reimposed at 2 p.m. on the same day. People living in the 5 northern districts, however, are prohibited from leaving their respective districts. The announcement issued by the Presidential Secretariat stated that the movement restriction will remain in place for the people in Jaffna, Mana, Vaunia, Mullaitivu and Kilinochchi districts until they identify all the people who came into contact with a priest from Switzerland who has since tested positive for COVID-19. The government calls upon the people to extend their fullest cooperation to ensure safety of the people of North. In the meantime, the curfew for other remaining districts in the island will be lifted at 6 a.m. tomorrow as planned earlier, but will be reimposed at 2 p.m. on the same day and be in effect until 6 a.m. on Tuesday the 24th. In the meantime, the government urges all to stay indoors during the curfew hours while maintaining a minimum distance of 1 meter from each other. It also announced the closure of all liquor shops in the island at all times, even when the curfew is lifted. The police, meanwhile, has been instructed to make facilities for the farming community to engage in their cultivation work without any disruption. As there are adequate stocks of food and other essential items, the government has advised the public not to panic buy, saying that facilities for transporting these goods are ensured. The President's media division says that further extensions to the curfew will be announced on a later date. According to police media spokesperson SP Jaliya Sena Ratna, 790 people have now been arrested for violating the curfew. He added that 156 vehicles were also taken into police custody. The arrested were made over unnecessary loitering, consumption of liquor in a group setting, unnecessary travelling, misbehaving under the influence of alcohol, trading and other offences. 3 individuals have been apprehended while in possession of cannabis in Haliyala, Uduvara, while loafing at a bus stand in the area. During curfew hours, 8 people who were working at a gem mine at an estate in Norwood were also arrested by the police. 4 persons were arrested in Bhagavantalava estate while travelling in a 3-wheeler during curfew hours. They were also in possession of Kerala cannabis. A group of youths found playing at a ground in Hatton meanwhile was sent back home by the area police after giving them strict advice. In Kegol, 3 persons were arrested for opening a liquor store along Kalugalla Mavata. A curfew might be in effect and the country may be attempting to overcome a global pandemic. But even in this troubled time, humanity has prevailed as police and locals in some cities took measures to provide food for the needy during the curfew. Meanwhile, the governor of the central province requests members of the public to avoid unnecessary visits to the central province, which encompasses the districts of Kandy, Nuwara and Matale. With ports, especially the Colombo port, having great significance to the country's economy, Subject Minister Johnston Fernando assures that the Colombo port is a safe and sound place, urging its staff not to harbour any concerns of entering the premises.
In the meantime, 4 fresh cases of COVID-19 were added to Sri Lanka's tally today, bringing the total to 81. And for the first time since the virus was detected in Sri Lanka, Director General of Health Services Dr. Anil Jasinghe stated that 2 patients are in critical condition. 48 cases from the country's reported infections are persons who travelled to the country from overseas.
The number of coronavirus infections in the country increased to 81 today, with the identification of 4 more COVID-19 cases. Among them is an assistant at a Catholic church in Ariale of Jaffna. A Swiss priest who had come to Sri Lanka recently had conducted a service at a church in Jaffna. He later tested positive for COVID-19. 48 out of the 81 cases of infections are individuals who travelled to Sri Lanka from overseas. 32 patients diagnosed with the deadly virus has been detected from within the quarantine centres. Among the confirmed cases, 17 are from Colombo and 10 are from the Gampaha district. Putlam district has confirmed 6 patients so far. 4 infected persons has been identified from Kaluthara district and 3 from Ratnapura district. The districts of Kurunagala, Gaul, Kegol, Batiklo, Badulla and Jaffna reported a patient each. 3 foreigners are among the total number of infected. Accordingly, 96.2% of the country's confirmed COVID-19 cases are Sri Lankans. In more developments, 222 persons are currently under medical observation. Data from the epidemiology unit shows 69 of infected people are men and 31% are women. The data also highlights that 32.1% of the confirmed cases comprise of people aged between 41 and 50. Less than 1.3% of people aged between 70 to 90, who are also considered to be at high risk from the virus, are among the patients. 5.6% of those infected are between 11 and 20 years of age. In the meantime, the National Operations Centre for Prevention of COVID-19 says that 3,063 persons are being quarantined across 22 quarantine centres set up in the country. 31 foreigners are also among them. Meanwhile, instructions have been given to about 10,000 people identified by health, intelligence, military and police units, as well as the public health inspectors to self-quarantine. Police and public health inspectors also took steps to seal a resort in Hatton, which provided accommodation to 2 Hong Kong nationals. The owner of the establishment had not informed the police of the 2 Hong Kong nationals lodging there. He had also transported the duo in his own vehicle to the Katunayaka airport. As a result, public health inspectors have put the owner of the resort and his family on self-quarantine for 14 days, while also suspending his vehicle from use for 14 days. The Polonnaruwa Health Directorate's office has also self-quarantined around 50 persons who arrived in Sri Lanka from overseas. A woman who worked at a restaurant in Hambantota was admitted to the Hambantota hospital on suspicion of contracting the coronavirus after having shortness of breath and fever. Meanwhile, public health officers today issued a quarantine certificate to a renowned singer from the Ambalangoda area who completed the 14-day quarantine process after arriving in Sri Lanka from Qatar. A further 791 individuals in the Putlam district are also being self-quarantined at their homes. Meanwhile, 30 hospitals across the country have been set up to treat people who are suspected of carrying the coronavirus. In addition to the Infectious Diseases Hospital and Valikanda Base Hospital, Mulariava and Homagama hospitals are used to treat suspected patients, while the Neville Fernando Hospital in Malabar is treating expectant mothers who are suspected to be infected with COVID-19. The Director General of Health Services stated that the intensive care unit of the Kotalavala Medical Faculty will also be used for treatment. Meanwhile, another 829 pilgrims who were stranded in India after setting off to Dambadiva were flown back to the country last night as well as today. It means that the government has now brought back all Sri Lankan devotees who went on a pilgrimage to Dambadiva. They have been directed to the Iranamadu Quarantine Centre. The Sri Lankan Air Force disinfected the airline staff at the airport when they arrived in Sri Lanka. Government states that the decision to shut down the airport arrival terminal to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is still in effect. In a statement, the Presidential Secretariat said the departure terminal would remain open and flights carrying passengers departing from Sri Lanka are permitted. It also stated that the port operations will be carried out as usual without any hindrance to import and export process. The statement reads that these decisions will continue until the prevailing situation in the country turns back to normal. Meanwhile, Colombo, Polonnaruwa, Galle and Biyagama areas were disinfected today. Meanwhile, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has instructed the Telecommunications Regulatory Commission to provide internet facilities free of charge to students who are enrolled in government universities under the e-learning system. Internet access will be provided free of charge until the prevailing situation turns normal.
කොරෝනා වෛරසය පැතිරීම වළක්වන්න සබන් යොදා දෑත් සෝදන්න.
අවශ්‍යයෙන් ඔබේ මුළු පවුලම 100% දක්වා විෂබීජවලින් ආරක්ෂා කර දෙයි.
With COVID-19 intensifying its grip on the world, sparing very few countries, we thought of speaking to the global guardian of health. We have with us via Skype the representative of the World Health Organization, which is present in every country. And we thought of speaking about what's happening globally and some perspective of what's going on in other countries, especially in China, how China has managed this situation and what Sri Lanka is doing. We are joining right now with the representative of the World Health Organization in Sri Lanka, Dr. Razia Penze, live via Skype. Dr. Penze, thank you very much for joining us from home. I know that you're following the situation along with your colleagues of the World Health Organization, trying to understand what's going on. Give us some perspective of the latest findings. Now, the WHO's head did speak out to the world saying we have to think about how we're going to come out of this, not just the period of shutdown or lockdown. We have to think about a long-term process. So give us an update.
Thank you for having WHO there. As everybody has been following, we now have, this is a pandemic and almost all countries are affected. There are a few countries that still have not reported cases, but more and more countries are being added every day. While there is this situation where there's doom and gloom, there is also a positive experience coming from many countries in the world, where they have been able to contain and not only reverse, but also stop new infections from coming. China being one of the countries that had a huge epidemic with thousands of cases being reported every day. And for the past 2 days, we do not have any new domestic cases being reported from China. So what this epidemic requires is global solidarity, working together. We are all in this together, and together we will beat this epidemic. And there are important lessons learned from other countries that have reversed this trend. And while other countries who are struggling, there is hope, because this is a pandemic that we can control. We can contain and we can control this epidemic. What China did was this was all of society, all of government approach, taking the decisions which were at that time thought to be a draconian, locking down cities, preventing movement of people, but that has helped. What we call as physical distancing or social distancing has helped contain this epidemic and prevent new infections from coming. We have to realize that this is a disease for which we do not have treatment, we do not have vaccine. So what we have with us are public health interventions which are non-pharmaceutical in nature. In the absence of therapeutics and vaccine, what we need is to take those public health interventions to scale to prevent the spread. So as we were talking about personal protection measures, and what we have learned is physical distancing or social distancing, prevention of large gatherings of people, which facilitate spread of this infection, we have been able to contain the spread. China is one example, Republic of Korea is another, Singapore is another.
If I may also ask you, Dr. Razia, I know we'd like to speak more about China's situation, but as you spoke about scientists, the scientific world, health authorities trying to figure out a vaccine or some kind of treatment to this outbreak and this pandemic, a pandemic and a virus or something that the entire scientific world is unknown. We'd like to ask you now, we know that the US is stockpiling on certain anti-malaria and anti-Ebola drugs. Would you give us some perspective on this? We know that the authorities in Sri Lanka did send us a warning that no such drug should be issued without a doctor's prescription. So why would you give us some perspective on this?
So WHO convened a research and development blueprint meeting in February, in which we had hundreds of scientists across the world that came together to identify what are the key questions that we need to answer in terms of diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. And we have an integrated clinical trials platform where more than 100 candidate drugs are currently being studied across the globe. And there is one trial which is called the Solidarity Trial, which is a multi-country trial that is will be done in 10 countries, and the drugs that you mentioned, chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine, antiviral drugs like lopinavir, ritonavir, which are antiviral, the new antiviral remdesivir, which was also used in the Ebola epidemic. These drugs are being tested for efficacy, and in the coming weeks we would be having the evidence to say what drugs are effective and in what dosage and for what conditions. So currently WHO has not recommended these drugs because we are awaiting the results of these trials that is currently, it's called the Solidarity Trial, which is going on in 10 countries. So it's a matter of weeks, but we know that some countries have already started using hydroxychloroquine or azithromycin, and yes, there was a warning that we cannot use a combination of these drugs because of some side effects. So for WHO to make a recommendation, we have to absolutely have the scientific evidence, and especially safety and efficacy of these medicines. On vaccines, we do have multiple candidate vaccines, at least 20 that are undergoing trials and in various phases of the trials. There are a few which are already in phase 3, and they would be available for use in the phase 4, which we say the post-market surveillance.
Right.
It would be a few weeks before we have a vaccine which would be available for public health use.
That's certainly good news. But again, as we talk about China, Wuhan, the epicenter of this virus, they have showed amazing efforts and we don't see new detections from China. But this outbreak has moved to Europe, taking Europe by surprise. And here in Sri Lanka, curfew imposed, and we have taken a number of measures. So if you can take a look at this, you did spoke about China, what China has done and how they managed the situation. So how would you tell us in Sri Lanka the measures we have taken, where we are heading, and also we have been telling our people to stay home. However, there are emergency and essential services provided to ensure that everyday life continues. But if you give us some perspective on this as well.
So as I said before, that in the absence of any pharmaceutical interventions like medication or vaccines, we rely on non-pharmaceutical interventions. Social distancing and physical distancing, now WHO calls it physical distancing, is important. And curfews or closure of schools, closure of establishments, preventing people from getting together in crowds, this is an effort of curbing the spread of the disease, because as you know, this is a droplet infection and it spreads from one person to another. So if we have less crowds, less gatherings, we will be able to break the chain of transmission. So these are measures that are taken, and they are being taken in more and more countries because they have proven to be useful. To what extent and measure these lockdowns, as they are called, or closures they are taken depends on the governments, because they look at the local context, the local evidence, and WHO believes that the member states, when they take these decisions, are in the best interest of the citizens.
Right.
It is discomforting. It causes a lot of concern, anxiety, panic amongst people, but as I said, if we are together in it, we will be able to beat this virus. So a short-term pain would lead to a long-term gain.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Razia, for joining us via Skype from your residence to talk about the ongoing efforts taken by the World Health Organization and for giving us some perspective of measures taken globally. We'll take a short commercial break here on First at 9 and return with more news. With the announcement of the curfew, there was fear among some people that there might be a shortage of goods. But there is no cause that since, just as the government had given assurances over the last 2 days, essential service providers also gave their assurances over the country of not facing any shortage of any manner. With the curfew in mind, the government meanwhile announced a grace period for people to pay their electricity bills.
In the backdrop of the statement released by the President's media on the extension of the curfew, the government has informed the police that the farming community can engage in their cultivation activities without a hindrance. Accordingly, farming activities were seen in different areas of the island. In the meantime, a special meeting was held to discuss the issues faced by rice mill owners in Polonnaruwa in order to provide rice without shortage. This meeting was also joined by the Polonnaruwa District Secretary and the Polonnaruwa Senior Superintendent of Police. Minister of Wildlife S.M. Chandrasena meanwhile said, after visiting the Tambuttegama Economic Centre, that instructions are given to the management of the economic centre to release goods if there is a shortage. In the meantime, Minister Janaka Bandara Tennakon assured that the Dambulla Economic Centre, which was closed due to the curfew, will be reopened 4 a.m. tomorrow. Elsewhere, the transportation and collection of vegetables happened as usual in Norelia and other districts with the approval granted for transportation. The Kapitipola Special Economic Centre, which was closed due to the curfew, was also reopened today. Meanwhile, the people of the Kadubela Divisional Secretariat area are now able to have their essential foods safely delivered to their doorstep from any cooperative regional outlet by contacting the numbers 076-376-9035 and 071-040-2905.
සියලුම අත්‍යවශ්‍ය භාණ්ඩ තිබෙන බවට රජය සහතික වෙලා තියෙනවා. සහල්, පෙටි, පරිප්පු, තින් මාළු, අල, ලූණු ඒ සියල්ල ලැබෙනවා වරාය වහලා නැහැ.
Meanwhile, the chairman of Milkola, Santa Vikramasinghe, stated that purchasing of milk from the dairy farmers is happening as usual and that the police has given the go-ahead to do so despite the curfew. Minister of Transportation, Power and Energy Mahinda Amaraveera meanwhile says that the grace period to pay electricity bills will be extended until the 31st of March and that there won't be any power interruptions.
විදුලි බිල්පත් ගෙවීම සඳහා ජනතාව පෝලිං වල ඉන්න බව අපිට වාර්තා වෙලා තිබෙනවා බැංකු සහ සුපිරිවෙලන් සැල් ආශ්‍රිතව. අපි ඒ සඳහා ජනතාවට සහනයක් විදියට විදුලි බිල්පත් ගෙවීමේ කාලය මාර්තු මාස 31 වෙනිදා දක්වා ලබා දීමට උපදෙස් ලබා දීලා තිබෙනවා විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයට.
Meanwhile, the Telecommunication Regulatory Commission of Sri Lanka said that a grace period will be given to all prepaid and postpaid users to pay their bills, and further, the relevant sections are advised to take steps to provide loan facilities and extra talk time. Furthermore, refilling gas cylinders in order to provide gas to customers without any issue is being done by Litrogas Lanka Limited, while Laughs Gas also stated their ability to provide gas without any hassle. In this backdrop, a crude oil ship arrived in Colombo even though there is no shortage of fuel. In the meantime, mobile food distributors are given the go-ahead under strict conditions by the government officials to conduct their business. Accordingly, mobile vendors must wash their hands with sanitizers before providing food to customers and also after exchange of money. The program will be conducted under the inspection of the public health inspectors of relevant areas. Accordingly, distribution of bakery products to the public commenced this afternoon after informing the vendors about the safety measures to be adhered.
With the curfew set to be lifted in some districts tomorrow for 8 hours, the government urges people to adhere to a set of guidelines which are intended to minimize the spread of the virus. People who are in self-quarantine, however, are prohibited from venturing out as they face legal action if they violate the period of quarantine.
The island-wide curfew imposed to other districts except Colombo, Gampaha, Putlam, Mena, Vaunia, Mullaitivu, Kilinochchi and Jaffna will be lifted tomorrow at 6 am before being reimposed at 2 pm on the same day. This gives a window of 8 hours for people to restock their essential supplies. During this time, the health authorities urge households to send one family member out to the essential grocery shopping. Authorities also call on the people to refrain from sending persons with fever and cough out during this window for movement. Furthermore, children and the elderly must also refrain from entering shops during this time. As for shoppers, they must wash hands before bringing their shopping inside the house. It is mandatory that the people should wear face masks when attending stores, while maintaining a distance of 1 meter from one another at all times is also mandatory. Maintaining a considerable distance when dealing with the cashier helps to minimize the risk of contracting the virus, and health authorities advise cashiers to wash their hands before touching their face or mouth. Meanwhile, the stipulated distance of a meter should also be maintained in queues, especially at ATMs. People using public transport, meanwhile, must be seated at a distance from each other without physical contact. Members of the public must also keep their distance when purchasing tickets at counters such as train stations.
And we'll take a short commercial break to return soon. 2 inmates died following a protest and an attempted escape at the Anuradhapura prison. The incident has left 6 other inmates injured. Police said that prison guards had opened fire to bring the riot under control, which led to the deaths of 2 inmates.
The visitations accorded to inmates at prisons were temporarily halted recently in a bid to prevent the coronavirus COVID-19 from spreading. Around 600 inmates at the Anuradhapura prison, however, protested against the move yesterday while attempting flee by setting the main gate at the prison ablaze with the use of a gas cylinder. With the situation getting out of hand, prison officials opened fire. 8 inmates who sustained injuries during the incident were rushed to the Anuradhapura hospital, where 2 of them succumbed. Meanwhile, prison officials sought police assistance in face of the tense situation at the prison premises. Police was also joined by the Special Task Force in reinforcing security at the prison. Later, the police anti-riot unit launched tear gas to bring the prisoners under control, following which prison officials were able to put the prisoners back into their cells. No prisoner, however, managed to escape, and the Anuradhapura prison is given police and STF protection.
That's all on First at 9. Good night. Italy